Welcome to Crocodile MTG, your home of competitive, constructed play in all Magic the Gathering formats. Today's video was brought to you by all our wonderful sponsors, affiliates, and patrons. Thank you all for supporting the Crocodile MTG channel, and we hope you enjoy today's video. Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Jordan with Crocodile MTG, here bringing you another Magic the Gathering video. Today we are playing a spicy one in Pioneer. We are playing Sultai Delirium. Now Delirium is a ability that says if you have 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard, you get a bonus ability typically on cards. Now with that said, we are playing cards like Traverse the Uvenwall, which allows you to, if you have Delirium, search your library for a creature or land card and put it into your hand. Now, the base ability is just search your library for a basic land card. That Delirium ability allows us to search any creature in our deck up that we need and put it into our hand. It's a great tutor. We do reveal it, but no big deal because most likely we're playing it that turn. Now, we are playing also kind of on the Delirium side. We're playing Emrakul the Promised End. Now, this card is extremely powerful. It's out of Eldritch Moon. Emrakul the Promised End is a legendary creature Eldrazi, and this spell costs 1 less to cast for each card type among cards in your graveyard. Then whenever you cast a spell, you gain control of target opponent during their next turn. After that turn, that player takes an additional turn. Has flying, trample, and protection from instants. That's super powerful. So basically what we're doing is getting a bunch of cards in our graveyard, as we're also trying to find our awesome cards like Uro, Titan of Nature's Wrath. This is a legendary creature, Elder Giant from Theros Beyond Death. It says whenever Uro enters the battlefield, sacrifice it unless it escaped. So the escape cost is an ability where you pay green, green, blue, blue, and you get to exile 5 other cards from your graveyard, and then you get to cast it for its escape cost. So when it enters the battlefield, if it was escaped, you don't sacrifice it. That's a 4-mana 6/6 Titan. And whenever Uro enters the battlefield or attacks, and this includes the time you have to sacrifice it, you get to gain 3 life, draw a card, and put a land onto the battlefield from your hand. This card is insane. There's a lot of value for 3 mana, a lot of value for 4 mana. And every time it attacks, it's strictly free. So if you're playing against those mono red decks, you're playing against anything aggressive, they're not going to want to see Uro on the battlefield. If they can't deal with it, you're gaining 3 life every time this baby attacks. And you're drawing a card. And you're putting a land on the battlefield if you have one in hand. This card is crazy on the value hype train. So we went over Uro. That is kind of our main game plan is finding an Uro, aggroing it out. We have Emrakul lingering around. Now, I do want to mention to all of you, you're obviously seeing this, and you're seeing a bunch of, like, yellow taped bordered cards, and you're like, what is that? So that is what MTGO does when you don't have the actual card in your collection. And some of you are probably like, well, if we're playing this deck, how are we doing that? Well, I'm glad you asked. We have an awesome sponsor on this channel. It's manatraders.com. ManaTraders allows us to rent cards for MTGO willy-nilly, essentially. We pay a subscription fee once a month, each month, which actually ManaTraders, because they're an awesome sponsor, gives us that for free, allowing me to share ManaTraders with, 1, my viewers by renting any deck I need to, 2, also showing you the awesome product they're showing. But we end up, like, all these cards, like, look how many cards this is. Like if we took the cards that we owned and put them off to the side here, it's going to be significantly less than, like, we only own, let me just do this for a second. So 10 cards. We own, I guess we have a couple on the sideboard. And by the way, look at the cards we own. They're the cards that are like nothing. Like no money. No money in these cards. We own 18 cards of this deck. The rest of the deck rented by Mana Traders, because they are an awesome card rental service. They're quick, easy to use, and they sponsor our channel, and we appreciate it so much. And honestly, before I even started Crocodile MTG, I used Mana Traders as is. I paid the monthly subscription fee. I rented every deck that I wanted to play. It helped me a lot on the competitive side, because I got to train or test a bunch of decks. I got to play whenever I needed to. And I didn't have to worry about, selling a deck and then buying another deck and then selling a deck, because you end up losing money on that. And no one wants to lose money on that. Honestly, everyone, go check out Mana Traders. If you use our promo code Crocodile, you actually get to save 15% off your first 3 months. It's really awesome, and honestly, that value of saving 15% is quite a bit. Go try them out. Just try them. If you've never used them before, try them. I guarantee you will not be unhappy with their service. Let's get back to this deck tech, though. So I apologize if everything's a little wonky, because the cards are not there at the moment. I have to go through the process of renting them, and again, it's really quick, really easy to use, and I can show you all that if you want. So our main game plan: get a bunch of cards in our graveyard using Satyr Wayfinder or Grizzly Salvage. Satyr Wayfinder, when it enters the battlefield, you put the top 4 cards of your library into your graveyard. You may put a land card from among the cards revealed and into your hand, and then the rest into your graveyard. Grizzly Salvage, very similar, but you reveal the top 5 cards of your library, and then you can put a creature or land card from among them into your hand, and then the rest into your graveyard. So essentially, these are really good value ways to get a bunch of cards in your graveyard fast. Satyr Wayfinder also gives you a blocker in the meantime. It also helps mana fix quite a bit, and Grizzly Salvage, if you're just looking for a threat, you can find it off that too. Now, as we're milling ourselves with Grizzly Salvage and Satyr Wayfinder and finding lands, we're fixing our mana to be able to play Uro out of our graveyard. So these are quick ways to fill up our graveyard. We also have Fable Passage in the land base to help. It is a sack land, so you get to sack it, put it into your graveyard. It helps both Delirium on the land side, but it also helps power out an Uro or something if you have to exile cards from your graveyard. And then also, like I said, Emrakul, being able to play Emrakul for 6 mana or 7 mana is pretty significant in this deck. And being able to take over your opponent's turn, force them to attack into your big Emrakul, doing things like that is just insane value. And if you have not played against this card or played this card, I highly recommend trying it out. This card is extremely powerful. I played against it a lot in Standard. I like playing Jeskai Control during that, so I had Emrakul be played against me quite a bit, and it was very, very frustrating game ending when Emrakul came down. So let's go ahead and talk about our 1-drops. So Traverse I already went over. Traverse helps us mana fix by getting a basic land early game, or searches for a threat late game as long as we have Delirium in the graveyard. We have Fatal Push as a 4-of. This is just a quick, easy removal spell. So Fatal Push gets to destroy target creature if its converted mana cost is 2 or less. And then if something like Fable Passage or any permanent leaves the battlefield on your side of the battlefield, destroy target, it triggers Revolt. So I can't get Revolt to come up here, but Revolt, destroy target creature if it had converted mana cost 4 or less instead if a permanent you control left the battlefield this turn. So Revolt gives an extra ability if a permanent left the battlefield on your side. We have Thoughtseize as a disruptive element, just good old turn 1 Thoughtseize. Being able to take something, a combo piece, significant aggressive element from our opponent. Honestly, Thoughtseize is just a great turn 1 play. It's also really good against control decks and other matchups, like a lot of the combo decks running around in Pioneer right now. Highly recommend Thoughtseize right now. It seems like a very good card. In our 2-drops here, we have Jace, Vryn's Prodigy. Jace is a flip planeswalker, so this is another card we're kind of using our graveyard to utilize. Jace, Vryn's Prodigy is a legendary creature human wizard from Origins, and it has the ability of tap, draw a card, then discard a card. If there are 5 or more cards in your graveyard, exile Jace, Vryn's Prodigy, then return him to the battlefield transformed under his owner's control. It is an 0-2, but again, this flips pretty early, so as long as your opponent doesn't bolt it or wild slash it or something, this is going to flip. Then once it's a planeswalker, you can +1 it, and up to one target creature gets -2/-0 until end of turn. Or you can -3 it and essentially flash something back from your graveyard. Whenever you cast, you may cast target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard this turn. If that card would be put into your graveyard this turn, exile it instead. It also has the ability that isn't too relevant, but could be in some matchups. If you get up to 9 loyalty, you can -9 it. You get an emblem whenever you cast a spell. Target opponent puts the top 5 cards of the library into their graveyard. So that one doesn't come up too much, but if you do flip Jace on turn 3 or pretty early, then you might get up to -9. And, you know, some of the decks running around right now are very long-winded and grindy. So being able to mill your opponent 5 cards every single time you cast a spell is pretty good and probably going to end the game. Especially, you know, if you flip this on turn 3, +1 up to 6, you know, you're at turn 5 or 6 before you're embleming. So at that point, you're pretty deep into the game. And maybe that emblem will help you. So Jace here, as a planeswalker, you can flash back your Thoughtseize, your Fatal Pushes, your other removal spells. Or you can just tick up and use this planeswalker as a control element and slow down your opponent. We have a couple Abrupt Decays in the main board. I am going to run Abrupt Decay today, but I am going to debate if they should be Assassin's Trophies. I believe they're Abrupt Decays right now because there's a lot of blue-white control that was running around Pioneer. I'm not sure this week if we're going to see too much blue-white control. If they end up needing to be Abrupt Decays, end up being Assassin's Trophies, I may make that switch. I'll probably keep the sideboard Abrupt Decay, but I think the main deck should be Assassin's Trophy. And then we have Scavenging Ooze also in our 2-drop slot. Scavenging Ooze is just a great card. There's a lot of graveyard decks running around, or decks that are utilizing their graveyard in some way, shape, or form. Scavenging Ooze is just a great way to manage graveyards and manage your opponent that's playing it. You know, you have your Dredge decks, you have Phoenix decks that are still running around a little bit. You know, blue-black Inverter making them completely lose their graveyard is kind of pretty good. Anything running Dig Through Time or Treasure Cruise. What else do we have in this format? Mono red, it helps gain life. If you are able to kill a couple of their creatures with like Fatal Push, you can gain some life off Scavenging Ooze and help stabilize. Scavenging Ooze is just really, really good in the format right now, I believe. And if it comes down, not necessarily early, but it helps stabilize certain board states. So it's just a one-of in the main deck. In the 3-drops, we kind of have a bunch of one-ofs because this deck is playing quite a few, not fun-ofs, but they're all 3-drops that are utilized in different ways. So our main 3-drop that we're playing is the Uro that I talked about a couple times now. But we are playing also Courser of Crufix, which, if you're unfamiliar with this, it's an enchantment creature centaur, which is relevant. If you get Courser of Crufix in your graveyard, this is both a element or enchantment and creature. An enchantment, I think this is the only enchantment, quote unquote, in the main deck. So it does have 2 card types. If you're playing something like Delirium and Emrakul, you need to make sure you count that enchantment part of the Courser of Crufix. So Courser of Crufix, enchantment creature centaur, play with the top card of your library revealed. You may play the top card of your library if it is a land card. And then whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you get to gain 1 life. So this helps, you know, stabilize. It's good against mono red decks or anything aggressive. The 2/4 bodies, very relevant. But it also helps, you know, you prepare your decisions because you get to see the top card of your library, and then you also get to play your lands off the top of your library, which can help kind of filter through. It's almost like drawing an extra card each turn. If you always have that card on top of your library being a land, you play it. It's as if you're drawing a card, you know, it happens to be a land and you get to play it. So that's pretty cool. This does not let you play an extra land per turn or let you just play the land. If it's a land off the top, you can still only play your 1 land per turn, but it's a way to kind of help filter your top of your library a little bit. Similarly, we're playing quite a few lands in this deck, so we do want to play Tireless Tracker. Tireless Tracker is just a really good value card. It's a creature human scout. It has, whenever, this card is from Shadows over Innistrad, whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, investigate. So when investigate is, it creates a colorless clue artifact token with pay 2, sacrifice this artifact, draw a card. So whenever and then whenever you sacrifice a clue, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on Tireless Tracker. So this is a really cool, really good ability, because every land turns into a card and then grows the Tireless Tracker. And it's a lot of value, simply put. So we also have a Murderous Rider. This is just our murder/life gain card in the deck. Murderous Rider is pretty good. It can destroy a creature or planeswalker. You do lose 2 life, but again, Murderous Rider then has lifelink, and you can just play it after you lose the 2 life and hopefully stabilize. It's also, again, one of those cards that's really good against aggressive decks. If you don't want to murder anything or swift end it, you can just play Murderous Rider and use it as a life gain ability. We also have Liliana the Last Hope. Liliana the Last Hope is good again for getting cards back from your graveyard with the -2 ability. It helps fuel Delirium. You also have a control element behind it. So up to 1 target creature gets +2/+1. I'm sorry, -2/-1 until end of turn. That's the +1, so it ends up being controlling. And if you keep plussing it and your opponent's not really doing anything, the emblem is extremely powerful and extremely relevant. You get an emblem at the beginning of your end step. Create X 2/2 zombie tokens, where X is the number of zombies you control +2. So every turn, if you get the emblem down, you're making at least 2 zombies. As long as those 2 zombies stick around, you're making 4, then 6, then 8. Yeah, like, it's just insane. And that's going to completely overthrow any control opponents. It's also going to force your opponent to want to attack Liliana the Last Hope or get through it somehow. And if your opponent doesn't have any ability or any way to, it's just going to completely run away with the game. Again, you can -2 it, put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard. Then you can put a creature from among them into your hand. And it doesn't have to be the 2 cards milled. It can be anything from your graveyard. So this is a good way to get back threats, especially if you mill over your Emrakul the Promised End and you want to get that back later in the game. When it costs a lot cheaper, you can bring it back with Liliana. Next on our list, we have Ashkani. So Ashkani Graf Widow is a legendary creature spider from Eldritch Moon. Has reach. It's a 3/5 spider. It also has Delirium. So whenever it enters the battlefield, if you have 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard, create 3 1/2 green spider creature tokens with reach. Ashkani is a really great way to gum up the board late game, especially if your opponent's going to a go wide strategy. Or they just have, if they just have like a couple threats that are just too large, and you just need some chump blockers for it. Ashkani is a great way to just kind of throw a bunch of creatures onto the battlefield, especially for only costing 5. This is pretty good value because essentially you're getting 6 power and 11 toughness onto the battlefield with 1 card as long as you have Delirium. It's just insane. And if your opponent's at a low life total and those spiders stick around for a few turns, you can end up paying 7 and target opponent loses 1 life for each spider you control. It's a quick way to drain a bunch of life from your opponent. And again, against control decks and things like that, if they don't deal with this immediately, you're attacking for 6 the following turn, and then you're able to drain them for 4. So it's a pretty quick clock if your opponent's not prepared for that. We're also playing 2 Nyssa, who shakes the world in the main deck. A lot of you that play Standard are very familiar with this card. Nyssa, who shakes the world, legendary planeswalker Nyssa. Whenever you tap a forest for mana, add an additional green. And then you +1, put 3 1/1 counters on up to 1 target non-land creature. Target non-creature land you control. You untap it. It becomes a 0/0 elemental creature with vigilance and haste until end it's still a land. Not until end of turn. I apologize. And then -8, you get an emblem. Search lands you control have indestructible. Search your library for any number of forest cards. Put them on the battlefield tapped. Then shuffle your library. Nyssa comes down with 5 loyalty. Quickly ticks up to 6, 7, 8. Ultimate happens pretty quick. Your opponent wants to deal with Nyssa as soon as possible. Half the time, if you're untapping and you have a bunch of mana open, if you have something like Walking Ballista, which is the next card we're going to talk about, or Emrakul, you're just going to run away with the game. And Nyssa, in general, creating a 3/3 with haste every turn, it's pretty powerful. I think it's a pretty undervalued card right now in Pioneer. Some of the green decks kind of went away because they're not performing very well right now. But Nyssa is still a very powerful card and kind of fits into the shell pretty nicely. So we are playing 2 of her. And the last on our list is Walking Ballista. So Walking Ballista is a artifact creature construct. Enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. You may pay 4 and put another 1/1 counter on it. But you got to remove a counter from Walking Ballista and deal 1 damage to any target. So this is a great way to, if you're in later in the game and you have a lot of mana, you can just mana sink a bunch of stuff into Walking Ballista. Or you can also just play it cheap, remove something problematic like Goblin Rabble Master or Legion War Boss or something. You can play it cheap as a blocker, kill something else. You can ping a couple 1/1s away. Or, again, you can just play it for, like, an 8/8 or a 5/5 or something like that for, 10 or 16 mana if you have it. And with Nyssa, you do have it occasionally. And Walking Ballista is just a huge game ender or game stabilizer. So this card's really good. It's in here as a 2 of. And overall, the deck looks pieced together, so to speak, because it's a lot of 1-ofs or 2-ofs. But this deck actually plays out pretty well. And again, this goes back to Traverse the Uvenwald, because essentially we're able to dig for any answer we need. As long as you find this card later in the game, you have Delirium online, you can go get your Walking Ballista, your Uro, your Emrakul, whatever you need later in the game. Unfortunately, you can't get Planeswalkers with it, but again, even if you need a removal spell, you can search up Murderous Rider. Traverse is really good in this deck. And this deck overall is extremely good as well. All right, Emrakul, get over here. All right, so the mana base real quick. We're running 4 Blooming Marsh, 1 Botanical Sanctum, 4 Breeding Pool, 1 Castle Garenbrig, 4 Fable Passage, 2 Forest, 2 Islands, 4 Overgrown Tombs, 1 Swamp, and 1 Watery Grave. It's a pretty straightforward package. For the most part, every time on turn 3, you want to have your mana enter the battlefield untapped if possible to play one of these awesome 3-drops. You want to have your Thoughtseize and Fatal Pushes on turn 1 if possible. Traverse the Uvenwald does help you fix your mana and find your mana early. So if you're looking at your opening hand, you have only like 1 mana and say it's a Blooming Marsh, but you have Traverse, don't worry too much. Look at your hand, see if you have a couple 1 or 2 drops, because you can Traverse on turn 1 and go find that blue source that you need, or another black source or green source, etc. Traverse, honestly, is a very good card. It stabilizes early, finds threats late, like I've talked about many, many times. And Delirium is extremely powerful, and why we call it Sultai Delirium. Because it really helps this deck quite a bit. So let's hop over to the sideboard real quick. I'm not going to go through every card, but I'm going to at least go through all the cards on our sideboard. Disdainful Stroke, 2 Mystical Disputes. This is mainly for our control decks, or our Disdainful Stroke if we're playing in something like Mono Green Ramp, or a card or a deck that has a lot of 4-drops or really nasty 4-drops that we don't want to deal with. Disdainful Stroke is worth bringing in. Unmoored Egos for those combo decks out there if we're looking for a way to interact with Lotus Field, Lotus Breach, Blue-Black Inverter. What other ones are out there? Heliod Ballista combo, anything like that. Unmoored Egos coming in. We want to get rid of those elements. Also, if we're playing against a deck like Sultai, what do they call it? I mean, it's Dredgeless Dredge is the name I used, but I forget what, I think Ross Miriam was complaining about that deck because the deck name because it's not Dredgeless Dredge, and that's a stupid name. He said, let me know in the comments below if you know what I'm talking about. Ross Merriam calls Dredgeless Dredge something else, and I want to know what he calls it. I forget. Dampening Sphere. Dampening Sphere's in here again for those Lotus Breach decks. Dampening Sphere is a really good card because it hits both sides of the combo. The Lotus field ends up only tapping for colorless, and then it also stops that player from casting additional spells each turn because it costs one more for each spell cast that turn. So unless they answer Dampening Sphere, they're going to have a pretty tough time fighting their way through it. And Dampening Sphere is really a timing card. You got to make sure you do it when your opponents tap down with their Breach. Tap down with their Lotus field, because if they're able to just float 3 mana and then you play your Dampening Sphere, they'll probably just bounce it back to your hand or remove it with something else. So you really need to look for a window of opportunity with that card. That being said, if you have to force it because it forces them to have the answer, and if they don't, the card could just end the game right there. Cast down against aggressive decks or decks that aren't playing a lot of legendary creatures. I would bring in this. It's an instant speed, just a removal spell. It hits quite a few cards in Pioneer. Mono black aggro, bring it in. Get rid of quite a bit of what they're playing with. Hits Scrap Heap Scrounger, hits Knight of the Ebon Legion, etc., etc. Noxious Grasp, anything against white or green. I would be bringing this in. It hits big nasty planeswalkers that green plays. Mono white aggro or mono white Heliod Ballista combo is running around. Noxious Grasp is pretty good against that. Pretty much just a destroy spell for anything white. It doesn't kill Heliod or Ballista, so you still have to be wary of that, but it hits the cards kind of around that, allowing Devotion to interact. So next on our list we have Reclamation Sage. Reclamation Sage is just a general destroy target artifact or enchantment card. Has a 2/1 body with it, so it makes it pretty good as a additional blocker. It's really good against Is It in Soul, a deck I haven't seen too much about. I think the last video series, I think it popped up in there though. But just Reclamation Sage in general, decent card against anything playing quite a few artifacts. It doesn't kill Heliod though in the Heliod Ballista combo, which kind of sucks, but I'd still play it there because I think they're running quite a few enchantments. Vivian reads a 1/of. This one I'm kind of trying out a little bit. The card was pretty good in Standard. It's from M19. You can look at the top 4 cards of your library and reveal a creature or land card from among them, put it in your hand, put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. So a lot of times this is digging through your deck, finding your creatures that you're looking for, your Uros, your Emrakuls, your Murderous Riders, etc., etc. You can also -3 and destroy target artifact, enchantment, or creature with flying. And then you get an emblem, -8. Creatures you control have +2/+2, vigilance, trample, and indestructible. Vivian's an extremely powerful card. This is mainly, I think, for control decks, or if you have a really grindy mid-range deck. I could also see bringing it in against something like Blue-White Flyers, because it finds creatures that help you stabilize, but it also can destroy creatures with flying. So I could see trying it there. It might not be fast enough, though. We have a playset, not a playset. We have 3 Leyline of the Voids in the sideboard. This is for anything you're worried about graveyards. If we're playing a mirror match, I actually think I want the Leyline of the Voids. I think Leyline's actually kind of decent against this deck, so that's something we have to worry about. But I'm not sure how many Leylines. And again, Leyline of the Void is the reason I'm kind of debating if the Abrupt Decays should be Assassin's Trophies instead of Abrupt Decays in the main. Mainly because I think there's 4 drops and 5 drops you want to deal with in Pioneer, and I think Abrupt Decay might be a little too weak in that. I have to play it, this league the way it is and see exactly how it is. But I think maybe Assassin's Trophy might be better. Abrupt Decay again in the sideboard. I think I'm going to leave this one if I switch these to Assassin's Trophies. But Abrupt Decay, just a good removal spell. Anything 3 or less and it can't be countered. So a great way to remove Planeswalkers against blue-white control. Great way to destroy early creatures. It's instant speed. You don't have to worry about playing it on your turn. Overall, Abrupt Decay is a really good card. But again, Assassin's Trophy might be a little better just because it hits 4 and 5 drops that you really need to get rid of. Last on the sideboard is Hostage Taker. Hostage Taker, when it enters the battlefield, exile a target creature or artifact your opponent controls until Hostage Taker leaves the battlefield. You may cast that card for as long as it remains exiled, and you may spend mana as though it were any color, any type of mana to cast. So Hostage Taker is pretty nice. I played mainly against aggro decks. I like it against mono red or mono black. Being able to steal something pretty early, like Knight of the Ebon Legion or even like a Monastery Swift Spear, is pretty good and allows you to stabilize against those decks. But and it also has a 2/3 body with it, so I highly recommend Hostage Taker against aggro decks. I don't mind it against mid-range decks, but I'm not completely sold against the mid-range matchup because Hostage Taker can end up dying. So that's why Hostage Taker is in the deck. It's mainly for those aggro decks. You know, playing it on turn 4 or turn 5, being able to steal a 1 or 2 drop, it keeps the 2/3 body around, but you can also steal something with it. Hostage Taker is pretty good against that and helps you stabilize that board. Again, I'm not strictly sold on it in the mid-range matchups, but I'll have to look and see. But overall, this is Sultai Delirium. We're going to go ahead and rent all the cards from Mana Traders. Thank you, Mana Traders, so much. Honestly, your support on the channel has been so great, and so I honestly cannot thank you enough. Go check out Mana Traders if you rent off MTGO. Honestly, you can save 15% off your first 3 months. It's worth giving it a try. I think you'll like it. There's different tiers for basically whatever you're playing. If you're playing Legacy, you'll need a higher up tier than if you just play Standard. But if you just play Pioneer, you can probably find a happy medium between kind of the higher tiers. Something right in the middle. A middle tier subscription is probably better suited for you. Maybe I should do a video on all the different tiers Mana Traders offers and probably which one would best suit you. But that's a video for another time. But thank you all so much for watching. We're going to go ahead and hop into a league, so stay tuned, jump into the next video, and I will see you in game number 1. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed today's video, please hit that like and subscribe button. Also, check out the description below for more Magic the Gathering content. This was Jordan with Crocodile MTG, and we will see you next time.